Please make your way to the stage, Gabe Zickerman. Gabe, make your way up here. Let's hear it for Gabe. He'll be our first storyteller of the second half. So, just as it's scary to go first, sometimes it's scary to go first out of the break. So right now, I want to hear a big, warm Moth welcome for Gabe.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. So, I did not plan my trip to Africa intending to break like a dozen laws. That was not my intention. But I found myself in that precarious position because I'd been booked to give a keynote speech in Johannesburg, and I wanted to stop off in Ethiopia before going to South Africa, because when I was 12 years old, I met these kids, and they invited me to their bar mitzvah in Ethiopia, and my parents, for some reason, in 1986, wouldn't let me go to Ethiopia, and I can really hold a grudge. So I was basically like, I'm gonna go to Ethiopia. And I'm checking in for my flight to Johannesburg, had a lovely time, and the woman there explains that I need a yellow fever vaccination certificate to exit Ethiopia and enter South Africa. Now, I am a really experienced traveler, okay? I've been to like 96 countries, I speak 5 languages, it's not my first rodeo, but I'm like, that's real dumb. And my heart sinks, and I think, okay, I have to call the people in Johannesburg. I got to tell them that I can't be there. They have to find a keynote the next day. I'm going to have to return all that money, and who knows when I'm going to be able to leave Ethiopia. Like, this is crazy. And the woman sees my face. She sees my heart drop, and she says, well, maybe there's a chance. Why don't you head over to the hospital and see if they can help you? And I'm like, oh my God, the flight's in an hour. And she's like, might as well try. What have you got to lose? And I'm like, okay. So she says, leave your suitcase with me. I'll check you in so we don't miss the cutoff. Good luck. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep my suitcase with me because it is an African airport, but thank you very much. And I go running out into the taxi queue, and I'm like, you, Black Lion Hospital. And we jump into his like Soviet era Lada taxi, because that's all the cars in Ethiopia are Ladas. And we jump into his Lada taxi, and we're screeching through Addis. And he tells me, he says, when is your flight? And I said, in about an hour. And he's like, oh, the hospital doesn't open for another hour. And this is the only flight of the day to Johannesburg, right? And so I'm like, oh no. And he says, well, listen, man, listen. I can help you. I've been through this before. I've dealt with this before. I'll help you out. And I'm like, okay, what have I got to lose? So we pull up to the hospital, and he's like, listen, man, stay in the car. I'm gonna go, because if they see that white face, the price is gonna go up a lot. He's like, so I will do the negotiating, you stay here. And we pull into a spot, and all of a sudden, these 2 teenagers come up to the car, and they start like trying to get in the car and pushing the car, and they're screaming and yelling at each other, and I'm Harik, and I'm like, oh my God, we're getting carjacked. Like, I thought I was in the clear. And the driver is like, no problem, okay, get in. And they get in, and this kid pulls out of his backpack a dozen official United Nations, WHO, yellow fever vaccination certificates signed and dated by the chief medical officer of Ethiopia. I'm not kidding you. And I say, okay, I'll take one of them. I don't have much cash left on me, so I have to negotiate. I use every Jewish power that I have and get the price to where I'm Jewish also, by the way, so just FYI. Because otherwise that was awkward. So I do everything in my power. I negotiate this price. I get back in the car. Let's go back, and we're flying back across Addis, and every time the car stops, I pull out a blue pen and a black pen and pretend to write as the doctor and as me in this little booklet. I throw this money at the driver. I run into the airport. The woman sees me. She stands up and she says, sir, do you have your yellow fever vaccination certificate? And I pull out of my pocket this certificate, which is completely faked. And she knows is completely fake, because she's literally the person who told me how to get a fake yellow fever vaccination certificate. This is also how pandemics start. And she looks at it and she goes, have a nice flight, and hands me my boarding pass. So I go through security, I go through immigration, my heart is pounding. I go down to my gate, they check my boarding pass, they check my passport, they check my yellow fever vaccination certificate. I'm like, yes. I get on board, I sit down on the plane, we're about to close the door. The purser comes up to me and says, sir, where are you going? And I said, Johannesburg. And he's like, He's like, well, we're going to Douala in Cameroon, so you are on the wrong plane. And if you've ever, and of course, I thought I was in the Clare Heart Drops. And if you know anything about African geography, you know Douala is definitely not on the way from Addis Ababa to Johannesburg. And all of a sudden I hear behind me, I hear this voice, Mr. Gabriel, Mr. Gabriel. And I turn around and there's this woman and she's like, you are so late for your plane, come. And she's like off, it's Ethiopia, so she's like running like a marathon. And I'm grabbing my stuff and I run up from the airplane and I run into the main waiting area, and I guess word had gotten out that some crazy white dude got on the wrong plane, because everybody in the waiting room was like, yes, go, go, go. And like cheering me on. So I like run on and get on the plane, the door closes, I'm the last person on, and I think, okay, now I'm in the clear, and then I remember I have to get through immigration in South Africa with this fake document, right? So I spend the next 8 hours on edge, and we get to the airport, we get to Ortambo, and I get out. And my parents were refugees from Eastern Europe. So one of the things that refugees from Eastern Europe are really good at doing is sussing out which border guard is easy and which border guard is a problem, okay? So my parents taught me very, very well at a very early age, and I picked this guy, and he's very sympathetic looking, and I go up to him, and he looks at me, and he looks at my passport, and he looks at me, and he looks at my ticket, and he looks at me, and he thumbs through the yellow fever vaccination certificate. My heart is beating out of my chest, but I'm like, stone cold, stone cold. And then I hear the most magical sound in the world, the sound of the passport being stamped, welcome to South Africa. So if you ever need any help getting illegal documents in Africa, I know the people.
Let's hear it for Gabe.